Yes, so Vishnu is at work in meta-Hinduism, in all these traditions and lineages, including theosophy, Freemasonry, anthroposophy, and the more esoteric traditions, which are in the esoteric sections of the periodic table. My view is that they all need to work together. This planet is facing such problems, such swathes of untruth and lies, that the avatars of the planet now have to come together and work together. Don't care what your outer religion is, or whether you're recognised as a guru or a teacher or an avatar or whatever. This is why I proposed and mooted the idea of a council of avatars. We need people to step forth who, yes, I'm a leading Buddhist, Maitreya figure, happy to help. How can I serve? Yes, I'm a rishi, I have thousands of students. Yes, how can I serve? Yes, I'm a Christian, sage, I have thousands of disciples around the planet. How can I help? We need these modern day avatars and representatives to come forward. There is a paradox here, is that the true avatar will never put themselves forward because they've gone beyond ego. Whereas the people that will put themselves forward are the very ones you don't want. It's a paradox. That's why Christ was always telling his disciples, don't tell anyone who I am. Keep it quiet. Don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. Keep humble in the face of, the temptations of Lucifer and his pride, Iblis, to use the Islamic term. And Muhammad himself was in that same lineage of humility. He was content to be merely another prophet, not even an avatar, just a prophet. There's a conversation to be had among the sages of humanity currently in incarnation about how we can all calibrate our theological differences so that they become intermeshing gears to get the vehicle of humanity moving forward instead of blockages that block each other. The Trinity is a brilliant idea. It's a great idea. It has traction. So is unity. So is duality. We need to get all these things working together, just as we need all the mathematics of different number-based systems to work in harmony. So that's Vishnu's plan. I've given you a little glimpse of what the Avatar Council are up to behind the scenes. Yes. Okay, who's the other deity? Well, this one is pretty powerful too. It's like is it the Western equivalent to Vishnu? It's Apollo. And I'm in the room of Apollo here in the Museum of the Muses. Each room is a different muse. Apollo was known as the choir master of the Muses on Olympus. He's very much a polymathic deity who is the master of medicine. He's the origin of healing. His son Asclepius could bring people back from the dead and originated the Western medical tradition. Hippocrates and so on are all sworn to serve Apollo. The oath that you take when you become a doctor, a Hippocratic oath, is sworn to Apollo in its original form. He's also the god of prophecy, so all the prophets of all cultures, and that includes all the avatars. The Greek term prophetes includes what Hindus and others call avatars. It's a coming down is the etymology of avatar. But a prophet is someone that receives what comes down and then shares it. So the concept of a prophetes and an avatar come from the same psychoetymological origin. Apollo's the deity behind all that because he wants to save humanity, just as Vishnu does. He wants humanity to get with the divine project, to listen to the will of the gods. How can we do the right thing if we are so full of our own ego all we can hear is ourselves? Or, so full of listening to lies that we can never hear truth. Apollo wants us to go to that small, still place and find truth. I've been to Delphi several times, and behind me you'll see the banner of the International Delphic Games, which I'm pleased to say were refounded in 1994 by my friend Christian Kirsch of Berlin. I'm the educational coordinator for the International Delphic Games, which we're hoping its next edition will take place in 2026. The Delphic Games ran for 1,000 years. They were 2 years after and before the Olympic Games in the same sequel. of events. And unlike the Olympics, which were focused mainly on sport, the Delphic Games were of the arts, of music, of poetry, of intellecting, of dance, of painting. And they took place in and around Delphi with contestants coming from all over the known world, which was largely the Hellenic world. We know that Aristotle was invited to Delphi to try and find the archives, because there was a tragic fire during his lifetime when the archives of the games burnt down, and he was asked to kind of come and work out the past history. They lasted up until they were shut down forcibly by the false Christian emperors of Byzantium, who had an aversion to wisdom. I call it Sophiophobia, fear of wisdom, because pagans were powerful, pagans were wise. I think this goes back to Constantine himself, because he was afraid of pagans, because his wife was a pagan, Faustina, and he had her killed. She came from a long lineage of Roman aristocracy and pagans that didn't buy into Constantine's superficial form of Christianity, which wasn't intellectually rigorous. Constantine wasn't intellectual, he was just a soldier. You can see from his stature, his huge jaw. He was a warrior kind of guy that wanted a dumbed down form of Christianity, and if you didn't like that, later emperors then started to persecute you, and intellectuals had to go underground, which is a tragedy for the empire itself, and no wonder Rome eventually perished, both in the West, in the capital, and in Byzantium, because you cannot survive if you're basing your civilization on lies, as Constantine had done. You may get away with it for a while, but it won't last forever. In the West, the Holy Roman Empire lived for a very long time, but Napoleon brought it down in the end. The man who'd been in the cave of Ra in the Great Pyramid. And that, by the way, comes from Manly P. Hall. In his wonderful Secret Teachings of All the Ages, I've not seen it documented in any full biographies of Napoleon, but I'm reading one at the moment. And of course there's a new film coming out about Napoleon, which I hope might include, well, I'm sure it will include his visit to Egypt. Whether they'll include his trip to the Great Pyramid, that remains to be seen. But we know he was a Freemason. I imagine that won't be seen in the film, because but there is a long director's cut of 4 hours, which I hope we'll see someday. The point here is that Apollo was not only the god of healing, he was the god of the Delphic Games, he was the god of the arts, he was the god of music. And the word music, the muses, were his friends, helpers, devotees, even lovers. Orpheus was conceived through the power of the muses. There's great mysteries here that if you're seriously interested, look into my Tarot of the Gods and research what I have to say about Apollo, because he was a pretty impressive deity. Now, I've equated him with the major arcana card for temperance, because temperance is an important card in the tarot, and really that's Apollo's thing. He was a man, a deity of moderation. Unlike Dionysus, who, as we know, liked to party maybe a bit much, and we love Dionysus for that, but Apollo would say, okay, it's midnight, I'm going home to bed. He was always determined to keep his soul anchored in wisdom and not let it become over turbulent by lust and greed and all the passions. This is why in the Christian, Islamic, Jewish tradition, philosophers such as Plato, who were really devotees of Apollo, and Aristotle most certainly was, because he called his Lyceum after Apollo Lycius, who was one of the forms of Apollo. That's why it dovetails so well with their teachings on moderation, because Christ taught the same, Muhammad taught the same, and every rabbi worth his salt or her salt teaches the same. The only thing that one can do to excess is study the Torah, is find wisdom. I'm extending that to the universal Torah of all the gods, because I'm so in love with them all. It seems to me that the instruction is to love God with all your heart, your mind and your soul. Well, we are living in a blessed generation. We can access all this stuff now. I don't think a former generation could have written a tarot of the gods. But the internet and publications and having a huge library and the libraries of the world that I've spent time in now make it possible for the first time in history. Shouldn't we love them all? Of course. And at the heart of all of them is this esoteric unity. And Apollo knew that. Plato, his great priest, said, look, the real name for the absolute is the good or the one, to hen. Because that oneness is the place where they all come together in unity, which is another word for love. Love is unity. So that's why Apollo and Vishnu are such brilliant friends and colleagues. They're both sending down prophets, sending down avatars to try and bring mankind away from the brink of self-destruction. Because ultimately, all the troubles of the world, a lot of the troubles of the world at least, are about self-destruction. You know, the ego wants to destroy itself, so it sort of wounds and hurts its body. Well, Apollo and Vishnu and philosophical wisdom teach the greatest victory is to transcend one's ego, as Buddha said, and as Mahavira said, and as the rishis have said, and all the great philosophers of the West have said. That moderation of one's egotistical urges to be able to find enlightenment, if you want. One way of thinking about enlightenment, yes, sure, it's about light, but it's also about becoming light, as in the phrase, the unbearable lightness of being. It's about learning to levitate above the waves of turbulence. Christ could walk on the water. What that means is that his soul was diaphanous to spirit, as was Yudhishthira's, another great sage and avatar, who, when he walked, literally his students and friends, you couldn't see him touching the ground. He wasn't aware of it. It was just like innate. And some of the great mystics and sages of history have had this diaphaneity to spirit. And that, I think, is what Apollo gave to his sages, like Apollonius of Tyana, like Pythagoras, like Orpheus, and like the entire Platonic and Neoplatonic tradition, right down to my French colleague Pierre Hadot, who wrote a wonderful book about meditation in classical philosophy. Yes, did philosophers meditate? Yes. Read Pierre Hadot, of course they did. They had their ability to stop consciousness and sublimate it to a higher level, as Plotinus wrote about. And, you know, all the great intellectuals have done ever since. So, Apollo was also the lord of science, medicine we've seen, and out from that extended mathematics and the sciences. And above all, perhaps beauty is what we should associate Apollo with. His statues are always very beautiful, and he was a great lover of both female and male beauty. And he wants the world to become beautiful, to be beautiful, not full of ugliness. And that's why the Delphic Games always included beauty. That's what the arts are for. It's to celebrate the artist in each one that Apollo is asking. So him being the, if you want, the Vishnu of the West, and Vishnu being the Apollo of the East, I think make a perfect symmetry. And it's for that reason I'm pleased that the Delphic Games, our Secretary General, is actually based in India. We have a large Indian component for the Delphic Games, and also here in Europe. I'm hoping that we'll organise a meeting during the Olympic Games in Paris up the road, which is a city sacred to the arts, to culture, and ultimately to Apollo. You know, so watch this space. We also know the Celtic Druids loved Apollo, going back to our earlier talk about Mananan, because he was equated to Luch, the god of light, and the temple at Stonehenge and Avebury by extension were really sanctuaries of Luch, sanctuaries of Apollo, as the Hyperborean Apollo, the Apollo from the great north, And really Britain was an island, sacred, an island, a sanctuary of Lu, Apollo, the deity of light. And, the harp, the favoured instrument of Apollo was what was used by the bards, who were basically the priests and priestesses of Apollo. And still are to this day. I mean, there are several thousand trainee bards and druids, both in Britain and overseas, and also here in Gaul, where the bard tradition lives on. So long may their work flourish. May the work of every artist listening to this, be inspired. Get out there, save the world with beauty. Know that you're blessed by Apollo and Vishnu both. And here's the tarot of the gods card for Apollo, and here's the one for Vishnu. They're both very sacred. So if you want to know more details, please get hold of the accompanying book that comes with this. These are from a 2-volume set, which you can find on my website, and contact me. And also get a hold of the cards themselves, which are beautifully made here in France, and beautifully illustrated by my dear friend, the Syrian artist, Sarah Nadaf. So thank you for listening. Let's hope that these words ripple out and the world becomes more beautiful and healed as a result.